Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the session number 37 on our course on organization theory and design. And as you know, we are in the middle of discussing the process of decision making in organizations. We started off with individual decision making and we discussed the approaches of rational decision making, the bounded rationality, the intuitive decision making. And then we moved on to the organizational level of decision making, in which we identified four models which are in common use these days when it comes to the organizational decision making. And we discussed in detail the first two models, the management science approach, in which we discussed how extensive quantitative data collection and how different fields of sciences like physics, mathematics, statistics, they all combine to solve major problems which the organizations face. And then we also discussed the coalition model of social and political, not maneuvering, but social and political factors which are more important in the Carnegie approach, where management and managers develop consensuses, coalitions in carrying out the problem identification and problem solution phase. Now, the third approach, which we will discuss in this session, is the incremental decision process model. Now, as the name suggests, incremental decision process model would be concerned about the stepwise sequences involved in the process of problem identification as well as in the process of problem solution. So, right from identification to solution, the incremental decision process model notes and records the minor steps taken to reach the destinations of problem identification and problem solution. Now, this model is the result of extensive research of Henry Mintzberg, which he carried out on more than 25 organizations. The crux of this research was the identification of sequential steps in the process of decision making. Now, this approach, the incremental decision process model, places far less emphasis on the political and social factors of the Carnegie model. Because if you remember from our last discussion, we discussed that in Carnegie model, managers do not undertake stepwise sequential approach, or they do not extensively collect quantitative data. They identify a problem and then they build coalitions within the organizations on the basis of political and social factors, and these coalitions then get combined and they solve the problem at hand. But in the incremental decision process model, there is hardly any emphasis on the social and political forces acting inside the organization. On the other hand, this model tells us more about the structured sequence of activities which are undertaken from the discovery of a problem to its solution. Now, one major finding of this research is that actually, अब ये बात ज़रा गौर से सुनने वाली है, because the crux of this incremental decision process model lies in this sentence which I am about to utter to you. The major organizational decisions or major organizational strategic choices are usually a series of small choices that combine to produce a major decision. Now, that is the major finding of the research carried out by Mr. Henry Mintzberg, जहाँ पे उन्होंने ये बताया कि organizations के decision overnight नहीं लिए जाते. Major decisions are actually composed of very small little steps or small little choices which the organization has been making over a period of time. And then these small choices and small decisions, they combine to shape a major decision. So any major decision which an organization takes, for example, if an organization takes the decision to diversify. An organization which is in the business of, say, soft drink production and distribution takes the decision to diversify into fast food restaurants. Now, it is a type of decision which will be based on analysis, it will be based on reports, it will be based on planning. There will be elements of management science approach in it, because quantitative data from various disciplines through various means will be gathered, will be analyzed using the approaches of various disciplines of mathematics, statistics, marketing research, and then after this analysis and planning, the decision will be taken. Apparently, it seems as if only analysis and planning are behind this decision. But in reality, even this process of analysis, planning, and the ultimate decision making is preceded by smaller steps which first of all took the cognition or thinking of management towards diversification. Obviously, those steps could be based purely on analysis, that the management looked at the analytical reports and decided to go for diversification. But usually things do not work like that in organizations. Management will get interested in diversification because of maybe a meeting over a lunch or a business dinner in which a financer initiates this proposal or project to management that why don't you diversify, I am willing to finance you, and both enter into a deal, first of all through verbal commitments. Then the management will take the senior management into consideration, will discuss with them. Then a series of small steps will be taken. The management will have their meetings. It is also a series of steps. Those meetings will result in formation of committees or formation of analytical or planning committees to probe and analyze the matter. This is also a small step. Within those committees, there are multiple steps taken. When all those steps combine, which means when all the quantitative and qualitative elements have been considered, only then the management will decide whether to diversify or not. So that major decision of diversifying or not diversifying is then not a whole chunk. It is not like an organization taking a huge bite. No, the organization in fact takes a series of small nibbles, and these nibbles combine to form a big bite. Generally, it is like that. It can happen that organization make a sweeping decision and take a big bite. And the history of organizations and history of management has such examples. But generally, the decisions on which the organizations arrive are a result of small series of steps or small decisions or small outcomes of meetings or outcomes of discussions. Or because if somebody wants to really trace the origin of organizational decision, and that is what Henry Mintzberg actually undertook. He wanted to really trace if a major decision is taken, like he conducted research in companies and he isolated some of the major decisions which were taken by the organizations, and then he worked in a reversed engineering fashion and he tried to trace the origin of that decision. And in many cases, most of the cases, he was unable to find from where the impetus or from where the stimulus of that decision making came in the first place. That stimulus or that impetus could have been come from any place, from production floor, from some of the middle managers, from some of the discussions or meetings of the management, from some of the quality circles which are conducted in the companies, and then some more discussion, some more work is done which results or which forms another step towards that decision, and then these steps combine and a major decision is produced. So when we discuss the incremental decision process model we should keep in mind the incremental change concept, because when we were discussing the concept of change and the notion of change, we identified that it is of two types. Change ऐसी भी हो सकती है where things change very rapidly at an extremely quick pace, like a major technological breakthrough in the environment, or a major move by a competitor, or a major change in consumer tastes. These are all the examples of major, quick changes. Whereas change can also occur very slowly and gradually, and we all know that flux or change is a constant phenomenon. Whether we notice it or not, but the environment around us, the ways of working around us, the technology around us, the consumers, their tastes, their lifestyles, they're constantly evolving or changing. If we imagine how people used to live in 60s, which is some 40 years from now, how people lived in the city of Lahore, then we would notice, if we remember it or if we have read it in the history, we would notice that the lifestyle was very, very different. The offices were usually from 8 to 2. There was hardly a concept of 9 to 5 full day working. People used to come back home around 2, 2:30, 3. They had afternoon with their families. Then 6 o'clock, around 6 o'clock, the families will get excited because that was the time for TV. TV had very limited air time, and usually it ran from 6 to about 10 in the night. So those 3-4 hours were the hours of real entertainment for families and for everyone. There used to be serial dramas, there used to be news programs, movies, all sorts of quizzes in that particular, with those particular constraints. And then people used to sleep. 10, 10:30, maximum 11, and that was it, because they had to get up early to go to their jobs. 20 years earlier than this, in 1940s or in 1930s, life was even more different. There was no TV. So the only electronic entertainment for people was radio. Before radio, life was even more different. So we see that if we trace the life or history of how people have lived in this part of the world for the last, over a period of 100 years, we will see that there are 4 or 5 major ways or styles of living which we have witnessed, which includes the current contemporary style of living as well. Now, all of these have evolved over time, and all of these lifestyles of people have been dependent on many other factors. Like technology is one important factor, because we have been given examples of radio and then TV and now the digital gadgets. So technology is one of the most important center around which the lifestyle of people has been placed. Newspapers, books, journals, magazines were the real source of information and entertainment and knowledge and enjoyment before the advent of electronic media. So from print media to electronic media, and electronic voice media to electronic visual media, and then from black and white to colored, and then from colored to digital, and then computerization, and then digitalization, they have all affected us, but has that happened overnight? We can clearly see that the patterns in some countries have been quick, in some countries they have been slow, but on the average, if you analyze the period of 60s, which we have been talking about Lahore, if we analyze how people spend their time in 60s in Australia, or how people spend their evenings in 60s in England, we will find differences, but not much, because those people are also dependent on a radio or a TV which was only coming for a few hours. So life evolves, and at that time in 60s it looked as if this is the most modern. Then when man landed on the moon, it looked as if that is the end of the history or end of the ideas. And then came the 70s and the oil shocks, and the 80s, the era of Star Wars, and then the 90s. So things have been, they're still changing. We cannot say that we are on the verge of the end of history or that we have seen it all. Who knows what we have yet to see, what this world, what this civilization has yet to witness. The point is that incremental change is occurring around us. Whether we notice it or we don't notice it, that is up to us. But change is occurring. And I think in some other sessions, I've mentioned the story of that frog. जिसको उठा के आप boiling water में डालें, the frog will run away. But if you keep that frog in cold water and gradually warm the water till it boils, the frog will not feel the change in temperature, and it will keep on sitting and it will boil while sitting. So some of us are like that frog who do not notice the subtle changes in the environment, the subtle signals which people and organizations and governments and politicians and our other stakeholders are giving us. So they keep on sitting on one position and they usually get boiled. Or if they are smart enough, they can understand the subtle changes occurring in the environment, occurring around them, then their response would be different. So keeping in view that static change or incremental change or slow change is a fact of life, the importance of incremental decision process model increases, because that means that organizations are also social entities. They are not in isolation from the society in general. So the patterns which are followed in the society are also reflected in the organizations. So if static or incremental change is a norm in society, it has got to be a norm in the organizations. So organizations, those organizations will survive in the long run or will be better off, which will keep on adjusting themselves to the subtle and small and incremental changes occurring in the environment. So the dichotomy create agar hoti hai between organizational characteristics and environment, then we know that if that fit is disturbed, then the organization is in trouble. Isko hum survival of the fittest keh lein ya evolution, organizational evolution model keh lein, but that is the fact of life. That organizations need to create a balance or a fit with the environmental forces. And as the environment is constantly changing, therefore, even if there is no turbulence in environment, there are no breakthroughs occurring in the environment, the organization need to address the issue of incremental change. And incremental decision process model tries to parallel that attempt. There are three decision phases which this model highlights. One of them, or the first, is called the identification phase, which is very much like the problem identification phase which we have seen in the individual decision making, in the bounded rationality. Here the problems are recognized. In the incremental decision making, rather than identifying a particular major problem, problems, since a series of small steps are taken, since the whole model depends on small outcomes of maybe a small meeting or a discussion or a presentation, therefore the whole problem will not surface immediately. The problem will be recognized slowly because it is emerging through taking various small steps. When more information is collected in the process of taking these small sequential steps, then we are conducting the process of organizational diagnosis. We are diagnosing the problem because now we are collecting more and more information. First, small decisions took us towards a direction or took us towards some alternatives about which we now want to collect more information. So we collect that information, and now we have enough information to compare the various alternatives. And the second phase of this decision process model is then the development phase. In the development phase, what is developed is actually the development of a solution. Because in the identification stage, we have now recognized problems. How much time will be taken in the identification phase, that is not something which can be fixed or which has a rule of thumb, because small steps taking us towards alternatives can take a lot of time, or it can come up in a short period of time as a small sequence of steps leading to another sequence of steps and things covering or uncovering very quickly. That can also happen. But the development phase addresses the issue of how the solutions need to be developed for the problem which has now been recognized. And again, this development of solution can take two forms or directions. One is that search procedures or procedures are developed. Procedures are usually developed if the problem is non-programmed, if the problem is programmed. If the problem is not novel, is not unique, the development phase of the solution will usually result in the formation of certain procedures to solve that problem if that happens again. Because we have seen that programmed problems or problems which are not very novel and not very unique, they keep on happening. Therefore, we should have procedures to address them. Because every time a programmed problem comes up, we don't need to enter again into an identification phase and then problem recognition phase and then solution development phase. We straight away recognize the problem and we have developed procedures for its solution, so we apply those procedures. So that is one approach which is taken in the development phase. The other approach is called the designing a custom solution approach. Now that happens when the problem itself is novel. If the problem has no precedent in the organization, or if it is a rare problem, or if it is a unique issue, then it will not be solved by our procedures which we have developed to solve the generalized, more programmed problems. Here, we will need a customized solution. So, that customized solution can take the form of, that will take time, because now we are dealing with specifics of designing a solution to a specific problem which was unique and which was novel. So, throughout this discussion of decision making, the process of decision making, the nature of the decisions which we take, and the nature of the process of decision making will depend on the nature of the problem. That we have repeatedly said, and I'll keep on repeating that, because that should really be very well clear in your mind, that if a problem is programmed, routine, the solutions are in the form of procedures, or solutions are also routine. But if the problem is novel and unique, then the solutions which are presented are also customized and unique. For example, if we consider a shoemaker, an ordinary shoemaker sitting in the bazaars and stitching the shoes, and he encounters many programmed problems, mostly kya hai, sole phat gaya. Sole phat gaya, he knows yahan par ek chamde ka pack lagaya, usko si diya. Depending on the thickness of that hair, he will apply a patch of leather and will then stitch it. That he has an automatic solution for that. But if somebody comes with a torn sole plus the top of his shoe is also tearing, or साइडों की जो सिलाइयाँ हैं वो भी tear कर रही हैं, and there are other problems with the heel, now he will need to examine that shoe in detail, and he cannot just apply a patch of leather and stitch it. Now he will design a customized solution for this problem, because it is a unique problem. He might never have seen this problem, or might have seen it happening or occurring very rarely. So, for this novel problem, his solution will also be novel. यह एक और तरीके से हम इसे समझने की कोशिश करते हैं, the issue of novel and the issue of non-novel problems. Suppose you're a doctor, you're a surgeon, and for you, for a general surgeon, appendectomy या appendix का जो operation है वो एक routine operation. It is a programmed problem for them because that's a very basic operation. Appendix के लिए जो कट लगता है वो कोई इतना एक्सटेंसिव कट नहीं है, कोई ज़्यादा ऑर्गन्स यहाँ नहीं होते, कोई ज़्यादा कॉम्प्लिकेशन होने का चांस नहीं होता. यू टेक द अपेंडिक्स आउट एंड यू स्टिच इट. ये एक रूटीन सोल्यूशन प्रॉब्लम है, इसका एक रूटीन सोल्यूशन. बट इफ द सेम अपेंडिक्स प्रॉब्लम presents as a novel problem, then the solution will not be novel. अब generally appendix का case present कैसे करता है? We know that if you have some knowledge about or interest about medicine, you will be knowing that there is a highly distressing pain on the right lower side of our abdomen, accompanied by fever and sickness. And sometimes vomiting. ये common presentation है. Emergency में cases आते हैं, they are seen कि यहाँ tenderness है, okay जी, appendix. Drips लगी एक तो patient को theater में ले गए, कुछ खिलाया पिलाया नहीं, operate कर दिया. Normal presentation ये है appendix. कई दफ़ा appendix complicated हो जाता है. कई दफ़ा ऐसा होता है अगर वक्त पे मरीज को नहीं लाया गया अस्पताल में या घर में ट्रीटमेंट की कोशिश की गई, क्या है पेट में दर्द है, दवाइयाँ दे दी, या कई दफ़ा होता है लैक्सेटिव्स दे दिए जाते हैं, उससे अपेंडिक्स इन्फ्लेम्ड और हो जाता है, तकलीफ बढ़ जाती और कभी कभी खुदा ना खास्ता अपेंडिक्स बर्स्ट होने का चांस भी बढ़ जाता है. अब अगर इन हालात में जो पेशेंट आएगा वो टिपिकल प्रोग्राम्ड प्रॉब्लम लेके नहीं आएगा. He will not come with those typical 3 symptoms जो मैंने पहले बताए, pain in the right lower quadrant which started from the center of the abdomen then shifted, and fever and sickness. उस patient के साथ हो सकता है कि pain इतनी ना हो but his conscious level is not very good, he is drowsy और his abdomen is distending. So अब जब सर्जन उनको खोलेंगे पहले तो वो डायग्नोस करेंगे. सो डायग्नोसिस में भी दे विल अंडरस्टैंड दैट दिस अपेंडिक्स विल नीड अ कस्टम सोल्यूशन, नॉट अ स्टैंडर्ड सोल्यूशन. सो दे विल हॉस्पिटलाइज दिस पेशेंट फॉर सम डेज. फर्स्ट दे विल कंजर्वेटिवली मैनेज हिम. नेजोगैस्ट्रिक ट्यूब डाली, अंदर से एस्पिरेट किया, एंटीबायोटिक्स शुरू किए, फ्लूइड थेरेपी शुरू हो गई. पेशेंट स्टेबल, जब मेडिकली स्टेबल होंगे, if his appendix is not burst, then he will be opened and maybe the area of surgery will now be much more because जो थोड़ी बहुत लीकेज हुई एब्डोमेन में वो भी क्लीन करनी है. So this solution will be custom made for that particular patient because his problem was not a unique problem, was a unique problem, it was not a routine problem. इसी तरह ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस में भी जैसे जैसे प्रॉब्लम्स की यूनिकनेस बढ़ेगी उसी तरह उनके सोल्यूशन में कस्टमाइजेशन का एलिमेंट बढ़ता जाएगा, एंड दैट इंक्रीमेंटल डिसीजन प्रोसेस मॉडल टेक्स दैट इनटू अकाउंट ड्यूरिंग इट्स डेवलपमेंट फेज. द लास्ट एंड द थर्ड फेज ऑफ द decision making process in this model is the selection phase, in which the best solution is chosen or implemented. So from problem identification to development to the selection of solution, the approach of incremental decision making is based on small steps, small sequences of steps which take us towards problem recognition, solution development, and then finally the selection of solution. Now, before we move to the fourth model of decision making, which we will be discussing inshallah in the next session, we will spend the remaining of this session in discussing decision making in organizations under special circumstances. For example, with the advent of globalization, we have repeatedly noticed in this course, and we have repeatedly mentioned that because of globalization, the shape and structure and design and form of organization has changed. Now, most of the organizations are striving to become learning organizations. Learning organizations, और especially जो IT sector में हैं और जो organic organizations हैं service sector में, they are striving to become learning organization, and learning organizations are very simply put those organizations which learn things by doing them, which do not rely on what other competitors are doing. They do not benchmark them as such, and even if they benchmark, they first try to make sense of those practices in their own environment. They try it in their own environment, they make mistakes, they learn from those mistakes. अब इस तरह के कल्चर को सस्टेन करने के लिए नेचुरली द स्ट्रक्चर विल बी हॉरिजॉन्टल, वर्टिकल तो नहीं होगा, क्योंकि यहाँ पर फोकस कंट्रोल तो नहीं है, यहाँ पर फोकस लर्निंग. सो व्हेन लर्निंग इज द फोकस, it is learning from each other, not only from top management or not only from middle management, but learning even from the lower level. So we need a structure which is boundaryless, flat, team-based, and which has a value of knowledge sharing and value of learning, and which is guided and led by people who are visionary and who believe in knowledge sharing, who believe in respecting people, who believe in trusting their employees. अब इस तरह की जो organization है, with such a fluid structure, with such a boundaryless structure, how is the decision-making process taking place in this sort of organizations? What are the special challenges for a manager in making organizational level decisions if he or she is working in a learning organization? Now, learning organizations में जिस तरह की हमने एक पिक्चर पेंट की, उससे एक हद तक तो हमें ये अंदाजा होता है that the problems which are normally occurring in a learning organization will be novel and unique. ये हम काफी सर्टेनिटी से किस तरह कह सकते हैं, वो इस तरह की जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस लर्निंग ऑर्गेनाइजेशन मॉडल फॉलो नहीं कर रही. For example, those organizations which have tall hierarchies or which are big or which have very sharply demarcated functional structures or which do not learn from their own mistakes, which follow the competitors or which take the lead from environment, or they do their own extensive yearly plannings and then they make their strategy. उन organizations में जो problems आती हैं वो novel और unique नहीं होती because of the nature of their work. But here the problems are going to be novel and unique because people are learning from each other through the process of hit and trial. Hit and trial में अब कोई चीज सक्सेसफुल, आपने एक चीज की, कोई आपने नया प्रोसीजर नए तरीके से किया, you will not know whether it is successful or not until you spend some time in experimenting. And you share this information with the other employees, and those other employees will share that information with some more people, and during this sharing of information, that idea will spread. The organization will try to improve that idea or solution and will then implement it. So, the first issue or the first difference between an ordinary and a learning organization when it comes to decision making is that the nature of the problems in a learning organization is mostly novel and unique, and that is because the surrounding environment is complex and uncertain both. Otherwise, companies will not become learning organizations. अब देखें, ये कोई choice से नहीं learning organization बनता. This is a matter of your contingency, your context. If you still can find, or if you are a company which is in a stable environment, then you can rely on the old tried and tested methods because you are in safe waters. Unknown territory में नहीं आप. But when the environment around you is totally turbulent, your problems coming to you are novel and unique, then you are all the time in unknown territory. जब आप unknown territory में हैं, naturally you are facing a lot of uncertainty. So therefore, the problems, the nature of problems will be very, very novel, unique, complex, non-programmed, full of social, political, technical factors, a combination of all these factors. इस तरह की problems होंगी. Now to solve such problems, there are usually two approaches to decision making which are used in learning organizations. One approach is the combination of Carnegie model and incremental approach, and the other approach is the unique approach we will discuss inshallah in the next session, and that approach is called the garbage can model. Garbage can model is one of the most interesting and exciting models in the study of management because it is based on a very strong and powerful paradigm of chaos theory. So garbage can model, because we need some time, because we need to discuss it in detail, therefore we have devoted a full session to garbage can model. We will not consider it here. Here we will discuss how the combination of Carnegie model and the incremental approach model works to solve the problems of learning organization. क्योंकि ये तो हमने पहले ही कहा कि लर्निंग ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में प्रॉब्लम्स तो यूनिक हैं, नॉवल. अब कार्नेगी मॉडल में और इंक्रीमेंटल डिसीजन प्रोसेस मॉडल में जो इंपॉर्टेंट क्रक्स हैं इनके या इंपॉर्टेंट थीम है इनकी, उनके इर्द गिर्द ही कॉम्बिनेशन अप्रोच काम करती है. इन कार्नेगी मॉडल अप्रोच, फॉर एग्जांपल, the crux lies in formation of coalitions of managers and coalition of any level of workers, which are used, and we have seen and we have discussed in detail that Carnegie model is the most important contribution of Carnegie model is the realization that management, managerial level, coalitions, social and political factors के ऊपर वो based हैं, and psychological as well, because ultimately when a coalition is formed, that means that those people are thinking, जिसे हम कहते हैं layman language में, in the same wavelength, or that their cognition is moving towards the same direction. Now when your cognition is, when you share your cognition with someone and he also shares back your cognition, that means that you agree on certain basic psychological, social and political and economic principle or forces which are in operation. So ये कार्नेगी मॉडल का जो कोएलिशन का पार्ट है वो लर्निंग ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में स्पेशली हेल्पफुल हो जाता है इन प्रॉब्लम आइडेंटिफिकेशन स्टेज, क्योंकि हमने देखा कि लर्निंग ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में भी actually when people are working in a boundaryless environment means in this case inside the organization, जो boundaryless culture है, तो coalitions और team तो already encouraged. We have mentioned in the characteristics of learning organization that they are based on a team spirit and they work like teams rather than departments, rather than separate groups. They work like बाउंड्रीलेस टीम्स. आप मार्केटिंग, फाइनेंस, आईटी, प्रोडक्शन के दरमियान की बाउंड्रीज फिजिकल नहीं, मेंटल बाउंड्रीज, कॉग्निटिव बाउंड्रीज को गिरा दें. यू बिकम अ ह्यूज मेगा टीम. दिस टीम इज ऑलरेडी a coalition. Therefore, the problem identification stage of any issue which comes up in front of a learning organization is ideally solved by using this coalition model. क्योंकि coalition तो already मौजूद है, so आप उन्हें problem identification या problem recognition phase में इस्तेमाल करते हैं. So एक half, because when we are talking about organizational decision making, we are talking about two broad phases: problem identification, problem solution. So problem ID phase taken care by Carnegie model, and the solutions are reached in learning organization through an incremental step approach. Solutions are not reached by forming coalitions. फिर तो वो political solutions बन जाएंगे. More powerful people will form more powerful coalitions. Their solutions will be accepted. Their solutions will be implemented. Then we are not talking about a learning organization. Then we are talking about an organization which runs on the basis of power and politics. So learning organization में power and politics, like any other organization, it happens. But it is not the main framework of making decisions. The main framework or the main impetus or the main stimulus for making decision is the process of learning. And learning means identifying the problems and then reaching these solutions which are particular and unique and custom made, because the problems are novel and unique. So problem आपने identify की, coalition बना के, solutions आप step wise approach में लेती हैं, because you have involved many people in the solution. It is not one group which is saying, okay, fine, now we have 5 alternatives. Out of these 5, this one is the best because of this reason, because of this logic, because of this rationale, because of these numbers, because of these quantitative analysis. So we are going to adopt this solution. No, sir, that does not happen in learning organization. Learning organization में solutions are reached through trying these solutions in steps. Because obviously, you cannot damage the organization by trying the solution in total. आपने एक solution, एक problem identify की है, फिर आप उसे chunks में try करते हैं, उसका solution के pieces, a bit here, not this approach, then this approach, not this approach, then this approach, and a combination will come up. A combination will come out, which will be the customized solution for that particular problem. So, the problem was novel, the problem was unique, so is the solution. लेकिन इसमें हमने 2 approaches को मिलाया इसलिए है क्योंकि we are not talking about an organization where sweeping changes are occurring all the time by the stroke of a CEO or by a top management team. Here everyone is involved in that process of providing solutions, therefore it will take time. People will present their points of views, their solutions, and ultimately जब इन सब solutions को मिलाया जाएगा, और वो मिलाया भी किसी sequential तरीके से नहीं जाएगा, when something will click, how that will click nobody knows. But when a solution will click, अगर उसको हम dissect करें solution को, we will see that it is composed of a series of small steps. So that is how we are taking into consideration both the approaches of Carnegie model as well as the incremental step approach while forming solution for organizations like learning organizations. इसी तरह हमने पहले भी बात की थी बिजनेस प्रोसेस री-इंजीनियरिंग की, वो भी एक अप्रोच है where the model of organization which we are talking about is not a learning organization, but an organization which is undergoing a major change, an organization which is undergoing a turnaround, an organization which is restructuring itself. Now, that type of organization will, जो उनके solutions हैं वो incremental नहीं होंगे. You see, everything is proportional and everything is based on the needs. अगर need है कि solution incremental तरीके से अपनाए जाएं तो फिर incremental तरीके से ही अपनाए जाने चाहिए, like we have seen in learning organization. But if the time is short and the undertaken project is huge and it involves a massive restructuring and a massive cleanup operation, then we cannot have solutions adopted through incremental approach. Then we will need solutions which are sweeping solutions like process reengineering. जिसमें आप you start with a clean slate, you break the old molds, you identify the business processes, and you structure the organization around those business processes. So ये एक drastic approach है. So depending upon the nature of the organizations, depending upon the environment in which they operate, the nature of decision making will vary. अभी हमने garbage can model को क्योंकि discuss नहीं किया, इसलिए I cannot say that our discussion is complete, but we have at least examined in detail 3 approaches to organizational decision making: the management science approach, the Carnegie model approach, the incremental decision process model. और आप देखेंगे कि in many cases, it's not one approach which is applied in organizations, combinations apply होती. But one approach will stand out. Like if we are talking about a scientific laboratory or a military organization, वहाँ पर mostly the decision making process will occur through management science approach, because huge quantities of data will be analyzed, huge scenarios will be built, many variables will enter in that situation. So management science approach will be the dominant approach. But in military, there will be situations when maybe Carnegie model is required. जब आप कोई coalition build करना चाह रहे हैं, when you want to take a strategic decision, or when you want to implement a strategic decision, then maybe an incremental process model or a combination of Carnegie model or some elements taken from Carnegie model can be used. So एक organization में आप एक ही approach तो use नहीं करते. Predominantly, depending on the business of that organization, predominantly one approach can be used. Learning organization में हमने देखा combination. Typical tall bureaucratic hierarchies की अगर हम बात करते हैं, if they are very big, maybe management science approach. If they are not into huge, I mean वो aircraft या aviation industry या satellite industry में नहीं, but they are in an industry जो consumer से directly related है, तो then we can have a Carnegie model predominantly applied there with a little bit of management science approach, a little bit of incremental decision process approach. But we will see in the garbage can approach that the real life simulation or the real life, क्योंकि हमने कहा कि organizations जो हैं वो societies की real life की reflections होती हैं. So real life कितनी chaotic है या real life कितनी sequences में है, that will determine whether the approach to tackle life inside the organization would be sequential, relaxed, laid back, or would it be also chaotic and would it also be very organic. ये हम next session में देखेंगे. So other situations where organizational decision making can take various forms or various combinations, or the example which comes to mind if we look at the organization life cycle, and we see that there are many organizations जो introductory phase में, कुछ growth phase में हैं, कुछ maturity की phase में हैं, कुछ decline कर रही हैं और कुछ turnaround कर रही हैं. अब जो introductory phase में organizations हैं, जो launch हुई हैं organizations with an entrepreneurial spirit obviously, they will need a very different organizational decision making approach, because here the decision making is mostly in the hands of an entrepreneur. So वहाँ पर organizational decision making is actually an individual decision making, because the entrepreneur is ensuring that his vision and his entrepreneurial vision and his spirit is retained. He will not tolerate any changes in his vision for the company in the launching stage. So launching stage में decision making process will revolve around one personality. उसके बाद organization grow करेगी, size में बढ़ेगी. Now systems will develop. So the decisions now will be different. They will not depend on one person, but they will start depending on departments. So यहाँ पर एक personality से, individual decision making से, now it is moving towards organizational decision making. Maybe the Carnegie model approach, management science approach, depending on the size and depending upon the nature and scope of the transactions of that organization. Maturity phase pe environment becomes a bit more stable, organization has got established, it has got its own brand equity. Now it will do extensive planning, analysis, so its decision-making process will probably be more like management science and as well as the incremental step approach when it comes to taking the solutions. और उसके बाद जब decline से आप turn around करना चाहते हैं, तो then we are essentially talking about novel and unique problems. So maturity phase में जो problems थी वो novel and unique नहीं थी. Growth phase में problems, new problems were coming, but during maturity, most of the problems and issues confronting the organizations were not novel and unique. But when it declines and the initiative of turnaround is taken, then the nature of the problem again becomes novel and unique. And organization from a very stable environment enters into a turbulent environment. Its structure is no longer a smooth oiled machinery, a bureaucratic machinery. Now it is undergoing changes. Now restructuring is happening, choppings are taking place. So now it is into a very turbulent environment. The decision-making process will now change. So along the organizational life cycle, the nature of the product and service which you are producing, the size of the organization, the environment of the organization, all these factors, the contextual factors of technology, size, environment, strategy, the goals, all these needs to be taken into account before we can come up with an ideal model for making decision in the organizations. There is no one ideal model of making decisions in the organizations, but as we have seen, we can use combinations. और वो combinations भी हमें carefully use करने हैं कि problem identification के लिए हमारे पास best यहाँ पर framework कौन सा है, problem solution phase के लिए what is the best framework, incremental को use किया जाए या management science approach को use किया जाए या Carnegie model को use किया जाए और कहाँ पर किस model से help ली जाए so that we reach a decision which serves us well in the future. The basic purpose तो यही है that we do not make a wrong decision. And even if we make a wrong decision, then we learn from that decision and we do not repeat it. Basically, individual हो चाहे decision making, चाहे group level पे हो, चाहे organizational level पे हो, purpose तो यही है that we make good decisions, quality decisions, and if by a stroke of luck or by any reason, if our decisions prove to be inadequate, then we learn from that, those mistakes which we have made in the process of making that decisions, so that in future, when we make that decision again, we do not repeat those mistakes. So with this, we will end this session. We'll inshallah see you in the next session. Till then, it is Khuda Hafiz. Thank you very much.